This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I want to celebrate Bitcoin's 16th birthday. You'll have to excuse my voice today. I've come down with a pretty bad head cold. But today everyone's favorite teenager turns 16 years old. And while the Bitcoin white paper was published on Halloween, October 31st, 2008, Bitcoin's real birthday is usually considered to be the 3rd of January, 2009, when Satoshi launched the Bitcoin network and published the first block, which is called the Genesis block. This is sometimes referred to as block 0 or block 1. In mempool.space, it's block 0. And we can see that it was mined on January 3rd, 2009. There are lots of interesting things about this first block. Unlike every other block, the Genesis block does not include a hash of the previous block because there wasn't a previous block. And also the 50 Bitcoin reward, the miner subsidy, in the Genesis block is hard-coded and unspendable, in part to prevent it from being part of a 50 Bitcoin premine. It's not a premine if you can't spend it. Unlike scammy crypto projects, Satoshi published the Bitcoin white paper about 60 days before he launched the network. And this was to allow anyone who wanted to be able to participate both in the discussion and or the mining when the network launched. Bitcoin had zero premine, that is zero initial allocation to insiders, unlike scammy cryptos like ETH and Cardano and XRP and really most of them. Satoshi did not premine. This is very important to recognize. He did not premine, but rather he mined many of the early blocks in real time, burning actual electricity, not because he was greedy and wanted to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin, which he did end up accumulating approximately, is our guess at least. And he's never removed or sold these, unlike so many crypto founders. But he mined these early blocks not because he was greedy and wanted to earn Bitcoin, which he himself created, but because someone needed to mine to help to secure the network in the early days when there were few or no other miners. There's also good evidence that Satoshi waited until the last minute to mine many of the blocks in order to give other miners a chance to win the block first, which is yet another sign of Satoshi's benevolence. If you're finding this video interesting so far, just pause really quickly here to ask you to help to support this channel's educational mission. Hit the subscribe button, that does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, question, suggestion for a future video. Share this video with a friend or family member. Then we have this interesting hex code in the initial block, in the Genesis block. And if we copy this and we paste it into a hex to text converter, we can see this is the famous headline from the Times that Satoshi is alluding to. The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. This is the actual headline on the newspaper. We can see it only cost £1.5 at the time. It's important to note that this was not an inscription, what we call an inscription in modern times, but rather was a simple message that took up very little memory in the Coinbase transaction, which is the part of the block that's used by the miner to pay himself or herself. Here, Coinbase has nothing to do with the scammy company Coinbase that stole this term. One purpose of embedding this headline in the Genesis block is to prove that the block could not have been created before January 3rd, 2009, since that newspaper headline did not exist before this date. And so this is yet another way of indicating that there was no pre-mine. There were not blocks that were mined before this. The newspaper headline also serves to remind people of the great financial crisis, the GFC, and the historical context out of which Bitcoin was born, and the fact that Satoshi's goal was to create a replacement for the collapsing fiat financial system. People who tell you that Satoshi wanted Bitcoin to just be another PayPal conveniently ignore this headline, as well as Satoshi's many writings on the problems with fiat, most famously February 11, 2009. The root problem with conventional currency is all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely a fraction in reserve. Obviously here referring to the popping of the housing bubble and what was happening on the bank's balance sheets in 2008 and 2009. But Satoshi really did see himself, I believe, as setting up a new financial system, or at least a new financial alternative. Turning 16 is often considered a year of passage into adulthood, so I think it's especially appropriate to see Bitcoin moving into adulthood at the same time that Wall Street ETFs, corporations, and even nation states are coming into Bitcoin in a big way. For better or for worse, that is. I remember talking about this in 2019 and 2020 in videos on this channel, and many OG Bitcoiners were obviously talking about it years before that, but now it's really, really here. Bitcoin is entering adulthood. The US now has a president-elect who has flipped from telling Mnuchin to shut it down to possibly launching a strategic Bitcoin reserve in just a few short weeks after he's inaugurated. And other nation states are looking to get into the game as well. We've talked about Bhutan mining on this channel. Now we have Hong Kong, a Hong Kong lawmaker who wants to include Bitcoin in their national reserves, a sort of strategic national reserve for Hong Kong. Swiss central bank faces call to hold Bitcoin in reserve. So this is really spreading from one bank to another. January 3rd is also widely celebrated not just as the birth of Bitcoin, but also as Proof of Keys Day, the day on which everyone who has Bitcoin sitting on an exchange should withdraw that Bitcoin to self-custody, with one intended result that exchanges that are not fully reserved will collapse. So this is an idea of sort of keeping the exchanges on their toes. I think that always holding your private keys year-round, custodying your own Bitcoin, really is the best way to go. So in order to do this, in order to take your coins off the exchange, buy a good hardware wallet like the Cold Card or the Blockstream Jade. Here's the Cold Card. I'll put a link to it in the description notes below. I'm obviously not being paid by any of these companies to promote them. And it looks like a Blockstream has a new Jade out, a little higher price point, a little fancier Jade, called the Jade Plus. So I look forward to doing a review of this. Stick to Bitcoin only hardware companies, because if a company offers altcoin support to their customers in any form, it means they don't really understand what makes Bitcoin so unique and special. And companies that support shitcoins, altcoins, end up wrecking both their customers and themselves. Think of companies like FTX and BlockFi, for example, really doing self-custody or cold storage, storing shitcoins in cold storage. It's like storing dog poop in a mason jar in your freezer. It's embarrassing and disgusting. Only weirdos do it, so just don't do it. Here are two hardware wallets that you really should avoid at all costs. Definitely avoid the Tangem, which apparently and allegedly has just leaked seed phrases. You can go down this rabbit hole on Reddit. This is another shitcoin wallet I would definitely avoid. And then definitely avoid the Ledger. The Ledger has just disqualified themselves many, many times over the years in terms of their tracking software, their leaks of their customer database, and just one bad practice after another. So I'll put a link to this video in the description notes below. Definitely avoid them. Final note to catch up on what we were talking about at the end of the year just a couple days ago. In typical governmental fashion, the IRS has now delayed Bitcoin cost basis reporting rules until 2026. So everything we talked about in Bitcoin year-end tax emergency and Bitcoin year-end tax checklist are no longer valid, or at least we don't really know where they stand. And so it looks like a lot of us did a lot of work, possibly for nothing. But I guess this is a good sign. We have a new administration coming in. Hopefully the laws will be adjusted. I have only two New Year's resolutions this year. The first one is to end the Fed, and the second one is, of course, to abolish the IRS. At minimum, Trump should abolish the capital gains tax on Bitcoin, but we really should abolish the entire IRS, just focus on tariffs or something like that. Now, every year that Bitcoin survives and gets stronger brings us ever closer to the end of fiat, the end of the Fed, and the end of the IRS. Let's drive the central bankers and tax collectors into the sea this year, because, as always, taxation is theft. And also printing up money for free, like central banks do, printing up money for free that other people have to work for, is also theft. These are outrageous things that are hiding in plain sight, and people become so cowed and so used to them, they've forgotten to fight back. But I think the beginning of the year is a good time to do this. Will 2025 be the year that the world finally wakes up from this never-ending nightmare of fiat? I certainly hope so, because I didn't join this movement to help to strengthen the US dollar like certain US politicians want to do. I'm really here for separating money from state. So thank you, Satoshi. Thank you for giving us a tool that might just get this job done. And happy 16th birthday to Bitcoin. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.